Stairwell I got high. Clear. Moving. Okay, next shot. Top of the stairs. Gotta get up there quick. Move. Get the door. Get the door.
Ready to die, bitch?
Hi, I'm Joel Persinger. I'm the Gun Guy. Thank you very much for all of your support of GunGuyTV. I am super duper grateful for you. Happy days. Yes, I said it. I'm going to say it again. Happy days. Do I have some good news for you? And actually, I'm not going to deliver it. Rick Travis from the California Rifle and Pistol Association is. He's very positive and happy today. And boy, anytime there's happy news in California about gun control, that's a red letter day. And there's some happy news today. Before we get to that, I want to remind you that YouTube shadow bans the snot out of me. X and Rumble do not. I strongly urge you to go over to X and Rumble because I no longer publish all of my content on YouTube. If I publish something that I know YouTube won't like, it only appears on X and Rumble because YouTube regularly threatens to delete my channel or deletes a video or puts a brick on my head and reduces the visibility of a video. So if you're not already on X or Rumble, I urge you to go over there. The last thing I'll say to you is if you would like to support the channel, please go to Gun Guy TV Crew. You can go to GunGuyTVCrew.org, or you can go to both Patreon and Locals. We're on both of those. All right, let's go talk to Rick. Rick, thank you very much for joining me. I really do appreciate it. It has been a very crazy season for everyone, I think, most particularly for you. You've been all over the map and sort of camped out in Sacramento a lot. So knowing that I have not really kept up on it like I should, I know I've been a bad boy. Perhaps you will enlighten me and other gun owners and let us know what's gone on so far this year. What did we beat? What did we kill? What's left to kill? You know what I mean? That kind of stuff. Give us a roundabout update, and I'm hoping there's a great victory or two in there.
Well, going back to January.
Oh, no. We're jumping in the time machine.
It was a very dark time.
Is this like the Wayback Machine from when we were kids? Yes,
yeah,
okay.
Right, yeah, Wayback Machine.
All right, let's go in the Wayback Machine. Go ahead.
It was a very dark time. In fact, some of your followers were like, wow, Rick's really negative. Because being upfront, we were in the second year of our 2-year session. We had come off a horrific session with, Assembly Bill 28, the excise tax that's out there. And we ran into 100+ bills, and you had Sam and me early on the season going, because 100 bills, that's a lot of bills, and even if you were looking at the analogy that Sam and I've used in the past of being a baseball player, even if I'm batting 400, which is like I'm guaranteed to go to the Hall of Fame, that's still 60 bad bills. And so, and those bills were across a wide spectrum of issues that impact us. And so, if you don't mind, I'll go through some of those because we've defeated a ton of them, a ton.
No, I really wish you would. In fact, it was so
season.
Overwhelming. I've been so busy at work. I kind of got lost in it all and just hope that maybe you'd recap it and let us know what's going on. So yeah, please go through them. We need to know what they are, what we're facing, and well, hopefully what we're not.
Yeah. So I often tell staff, so this is not me lecturing any of your viewers or anything, but I often tell staff that if you look at the Second Amendment, there's usually 3 sides to it that get attacked in the legislature. One side I've always called access. That's like access to firearms, access to ammunition. It makes sense. Like if we can remove someone's access, they can't use the Second Amendment. Another side has to do with activities. It might be competitive shooting. It might be aspects of hunting. It might be ranges. And then the last one always comes down to the culture. Like, how do we destroy the culture of those who adhere to believing in a thing called the U.S. Constitution, and namely the Second Amendment that protects that Constitution from a tyrannical government. And, in a normal year, we get beat up pretty hard on one of those sides, Joel, and maybe sometimes a little flack on, but there's usually like one side we can kind of cruise and go, oh, not a whole lot there. This year, it was across the board crazy. And so I'll give a couple examples. We had groups up and down the state trying to, as I'd said early on, remove dogs, particularly sporting dogs. Dogs would be used in hunting, to get them completely pulled out. We were able to defeat not one, not two, but all 8 bills that were in that space. Got them all wiped out. And we did that with a very limited group of people. So that I think it's important for people to understand, we were probably outgunned several $100,000 on that one, because we just don't have the money in that space to fight back hard in that space, which is what they were hoping for. And how this impacts everyday gun owner is, if you don't have a hunting dog to retrieve the things that you have taken in the field, like ducks, pheasant, etc., then you're guilty of a misdemeanor of wanton waste. And if you get a few of those, then you have a felony, which means you lose everything. So, the idea is to make it so distasteful for you that you'll say, well, you know what, I won't go hunting. Well, then if you don't go hunting, then do you really have the excuse that, hey, we need ranges so we can practice hunting, so we do this right? No, you don't need a range, because no one's hunting anymore. So you can see kind of the back door to this. And in that same vein, they had tried to run a bill for several years. It started with Senator Portantino. Its current form was known as Assembly Bill 262. And that was the bill that we talked about early in the session that was designed to go after any type of youth camp. Didn't matter if it was a scout camp, a religious camp, where people go for summer for a week or winter. Anything that had any kind of a pistol, rifle, shotgun range. There were even references to archery ranges, things of that nature, that it wouldn't be the people that have been doing those. It would be Health and Human Services, Moms that Demand Action, and groups that have never been in that space would decide all the new rules, or if you could even have those things. And that was being carried by Chris Holden, who is the son of Nate Holden, which, if you're not familiar with California politics, that's one of the biggest families that have been involved in California politics. And so Holden was coming after that one really, really hard. We fought that really hard. Ended up talking to the author, ended up pointing out several flaws in what they were doing. And literally, I'm very proud of defeating this bill, because literally a week ago, I walked the paperwork from one office to another office in the Senate, stood in the office for the majority of the day to make sure that that bill was gutted to the point where there was no references left on camps or kids or firearms or archery or any of it. Completely destroyed that part of the bill. And so it no longer has any impact on us. And to do that, that was one of the things I wanted, whether it's Sam Paredes at Gun Owners or myself or any other people out there in this space that are fighting, a lot of times that's what it takes. It takes us being there, because staff, I'm going to say it, sometimes doesn't get things filed in time. And so while they say, oh, yeah, that's no longer a worry, the next thing you know, it's on the floor being voted, and you're like, wait a second, what just happened? So that takes us being up there, waiting for it to come out of one office, parting it, kind of like you do to buy a house when you want to do it right, over to the next office and getting it done. So very proud, because that probably, stopping this one bill, stopped between 20 and 30 other bills over the next 2 years. And that's something that I think a lot of people don't understand, that you stop a study bill or an exploratory bill, you're not just stopping that one bill, you're stopping the others, because it becomes easy, Joel. If they pass this bill, then the next year you're like, how do I impress the boss and not have to work hard? Oh, here's 3 ideas off the list, and those become bills. And so when we can stop one like this, you stop a lot of movement, and you save a lot of money for everybody in this space.
I was going to ask you, there's so much inside baseball associated to this that I readily admit I don't understand. And I suspect that the vast majority of gun owners who would just like to go about their day without their government stripping them of every right and everything they have don't understand how it works either. You mentioned standing in there all day and getting a bill gutted. I mean, how do you actually do that? I mean, because you can't force them to get a red pen and start gutting things. I mean,
no. So in this case, that's a great question. Like in this case, one of the issues with the bill was they wanted to make sure that, for example, Health and Human Services would sit at every camp, monitor how many people got hurt, how they got hurt, how it was happening, what was the training, was the train correct? Okay, so let's just stop. That's just 5 of the 25 things they wanted to look at. So if you just stop with those, okay, so you're going to have somebody from a stakeholder group that has had nothing to do. A stakeholder group would be like Health and Human Services or Department of Emergency Medical Services or outside NGO like Moms that Demand Action, which has a political bent against firearms and the use of them. And they're going to show up and tell a camp that has been directed by someone like, oh, I don't know, the California Rifle Pistol Association for the last 100 years on how to do this, or the National Rifle Association, or others in that space, and say, no, this is the proper way to do it. Okay, number one, they don't have the experience. Number two was when I could bring in a couple of students who said, you realize that we had over 1 million trigger pulls with shotguns at camps across the state last year, and not one ambulance, not one. Yet high school football teams during whatever term they want to call it now in a politically correct world of what they called back in our day, Hell Month or Hell Week or a couple of weeks, those all had multiple ambulances because people got broken arms, broken fingers, different things that required medical care. So if we're not regulating that at a summer camp, why are you regulating something that never has it? And so those become issues, optic issues inside those members' offices that they start going, wow, if this gets out, like this bill's not going to go anywhere. And at the end of the day, they want a bill that goes somewhere. So you say, well, why don't we pull this line out?
So wait, hold on. Let me back up a second. Because when you're describing this, I'm thinking to myself, those people in Sacramento don't give a rat's you-know-what about common sense. They don't care about the fact that, about the truth of the matter. They have an agenda in mind. And so I'm thinking to myself, so how in the world does telling them that a bunch of football players in high school got hurt, but nobody got hurt shooting, have them change anything? But you just mentioned something, that the optics of that weren't good. So this is not because common sense makes common sense. This is simply because they want to get reelected, and they're going to look like crap if the optics don't look good.
Bingo.
Oh my gosh, our system is broken. Jeez Louise.
And this is why, I mean, to your point, this is why the impact, we started doing this a couple of years ago, and you and I talked about when I have Capitol Day and I fight so hard to get junior high and high school kids up during Capitol Day, more than I ever do adults. It's because in Sacramento, they will ignore adults. But we have a dynamic change in our legislature that we didn't have 25 years ago. And that is, prior to term limits, Joel, we had a lot of, kind of like we do in the federal level, octogenarians. People had sat there for 35, 40 years.
Okay, so educate the guy who graduated from high school. An octogenarian is somebody who's 80 years old or better, right?
Right.
Okay, that's not a word I use.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah, see the baseball cap?
So,
okay.
Octogenarian,
I think is how you say it,
isn't it?
Around
all week in the Capitol. So.
That's okay. Octogenarian, I think is how you say it, isn't it? Something like that? I don't know. Anyway, yeah, it's a person who's in their 80s.
Right. So most of the people
for
were
me and the rest of the people
older.
who didn't know what that was. Go ahead.
A lot of people were older that were seen in the position of Assembly and Senate. Now we have a lot of members of the legislature that are parents with children somewhere between, I'd say on average, between the 3rd and 10th grade. And now they bring them in. And so whether you always agree with them or not, but I remember, I believe it was Manshine, who's out of the San Diego area. He brought his daughter, who after the October 7th raids are a Jewish family, had swastikas sent to her and stuff like that. And so on a bill dealing with bullying, she testified. And people were like, oh, this is the next generation in front of me testifying. You don't want to be on a dais, which is where they sit when we're having these hearings, and be caught on film blowing a kid off, talking about how they're being bullied, or blowing a kid off about.
Wait. Hold up. These meetings are recorded.
Yes.
There's publicly available video for these meetings.
Correct. Now,
Methinks you need to send me links to appropriate things like that so that I can publicize the snot out of them on a regular basis.
I'll just give you warnings.
Yes, please do.
Do not drive while watching this so you don't wreck the car. But anyways.
Good night. Okay.
So those kinds of optics are why kids are so important right now in the Capitol, because people are listening to what the youth have to say or what they're thinking or what they're feeling. And it goes across the spectrum. I mean, I've seen some very liberal uses of it and some very conservative issues and everything in between, and it's effective. And so that's one of the tools in the bag.
So what strikes me about this, which I think is really interesting, is that if they're afraid of the optics, it means they're afraid of the people. That they're sneaking around in the back trying to do stuff they know full well the people of California don't want, don't like, don't agree with.
Right.
Because if they felt that the people of California liked it, wanted it, and agreed with it, they wouldn't care about the optics. Mm-hmm. They only care about the optics because they're doing nefarious things that Californians don't want. And they're afraid that Californians are going to see that on social media or on the news, or well, probably not on the news, the way the news functions, but, on X or, YouTube or whatever. Well, probably not YouTube, but I don't know. But, they're going to see it somewhere, right?
Right.
On TikTok or something. Or they're going to see it from an email they get from CRPA with it blaring all over in their face. That's just really a sad statement on the kinds of quote-unquote representatives we have up there. They're not representing anybody but their own agenda, it sounds like to me. I mean...
Well, that's fair. Politicians, when the next campaign starts, the day after the election.
Yeah, but wouldn't you think, though, and then this is, I think, the thing that's just baffling to me anyway, wouldn't you think, though, that they know that, and so they would do things that would get them elected by doing things the people want? I mean, is there somebody behind the scenes pulling the strings here on these marionettes besides the people? I mean, who's driving this nonsense? It can't just be the personal opinions of the people that get voted in, or maybe it is. I don't know.
There's major corporations. There's lots of people. I mean, I always tell people, follow the money in Sacramento. It's fairly simple. And to your point, you have some people who do represent their local interests. Assemblyman Gallagher, who I'm very fond of, he's a rice farmer. He's straight up when you walk in his office. You can see pictures of the farm, pictures of what they do. It's been in family for generations. And so when he comes out pro-rice farming, there should be no shock because that's what he represents. But there's other things that he's very inquisitive about because he wants to serve the people. You have other politicians that, hey, they just keep bouncing up because corporations keep paying for it. Unions keep paying for it. And they answer to a very select, small group of people. And that's what they're going to continue to do. And you look at some of the politicians, we can take the election season since we're doing the recap.
Before you even go, I got to ask you, does anyone, I started to say, why doesn't anyone? But that's always the stupid question because somebody somewhere has already done it and we're just not aware of it. Does anyone produce a list of these people and say, these are the people who are answering to this very short list of people and they don't care about you? Is that something that actually is presented to voters?
Yeah, you can look. I mean, it gets presented, I think. Unfortunately, I think there's a lot of apathy, and I wish there wasn't, Joel. But I mean, I get asked this question in a variety of ways, and so pretty much my standard answer is, look, this state is controlled arguably by about a half a dozen families. So you have the Browns, the Pelosi's, the Newsoms, the other Browns, because there's the Jerry Browns and then
And Willie
there's
Brown.
or Willie
Right.
Browns,
Right.
and then there's usually one or two families that are influxing in and out of that, or it could be from another part of the country, like the Clintons have held a lot of sway in the state for about the last 30 years. If you look to especially the Democratic side of the House, almost everybody is either connected directly because they came up as an aide, an assistant, a helper, a campaign fundraiser. There's a machine, and you can see that. And so when you hear some of the other people talk about it, I just heard a really good podcast interview that was done with Robert Kennedy's running mate, Nicole. I always say her last name wrong. I think it's Shanahan.
Yeah, I listened to part of it, and I had to rush off to the range. But yeah, I heard
she
part of it.
named the political elite that needs to be removed, the political dynasties in California. And what happens? A lot of the big major news companies say, oh, she's a whack job. She doesn't know what she's doing. I mean, they basically box her in. So a lot of people go to say something like, hey, Joel, did you hear this idea? Oh, yeah, but my wife says she's a whack job. Oh, okay. And that end of the conversation goes nowhere. And they know that. And so it takes shows and podcasts and a lot of things to keep that information going. And hopefully enough people hear it that they start to push that information out. But anybody that's honest in the Capitol will tell you, we recognize there's dynasties that we work against. There's major companies that cater to those dynasties that we work against.
Like, okay, so give me a couple of companies that are major companies that do that you're aware of.
Oh, sure. This is
Please,
fun.
I mean, look. Hey, you know what? This is Gun Guy TV.
So
Let's
you
talk
have
about
Bloomberg.
these. Who? Bloomberg.
Michael Bloomberg.
Yeah.
Bloomberg owns a lot of companies. Bloomberg finances those campaigns. Bloomberg, I will also mention, finances a couple of very anti-Second Amendment groups who are not housed in California, but are licensed under other states, and pays for the people that wear the cute little red shirts that say, we demand action all the time in the Capitol, that we can't get a seat. We have to stand up because they go in and grab all the seats. And because they're generally ladies, the sergeant of arms are being polite and give the ladies all the seats. So they know they have to force the rest of us to stand for hours. It's a choreographed game, and then you have somebody like Senator Portantino, no friend of the Second Amendment, comes in. We were able to get him defeated from running for Congress in his own district. And what was the reward? He's now being financed by Bloomberg and others to run for, wait for it, could it have gotten worse in Congress? I'm going to argue yes, because he's now running for superintendent of public instruction for all of California. And guess what? People aren't going to watch that race. That's not a popular race to watch, which means he's already got an advantage going in. He's got money and no one's watching him. And so we're highlighting that.
So there you go. Look for Portantino on your ballot
For
and
public
vote
instruction.
for the other
Yeah.
person, whoever it is.
Right.
If it's a chimpanzee, vote for the chimp. Don't vote for Portantino.
Right in Mickey Mouse.
Right
in Mickey
yeah.
Mouse. Oh,
Mickey
would be
Mouse
better.
would, I don't know. Disney's gone kind of whacked, but even Mickey would be better. So yeah, absolutely. I mean, vote for just the only person I would suggest don't vote for is me, because I don't want the job. I'm already got a job. Don't vote for Rick either. He don't want the job either. But vote for anybody. Write in John Smith. If there's nobody else running against him, write somebody in. But unelect that dude. That would be horrific. Wow, this is just this is what you work against all the time, is this kind of nonsense. This is like one of these weird, movies about the back alley dealing in Washington D.C. or whatever. Crazy. What else did you manage to defeat, and what do we have yet that we're facing?
We had several bills that Chuck Michelle from our organization and myself and Sam Paredes, my good buddy, we're all out talking about that gun confiscation, like Senate Bill 1160 from Portantino. He really had come off against Sam and said, hey, wait till you see what I got stacked up for you, which showed his arrogance. We went to work on that bill, which would have been mandatory firearms registration. We were able to defeat it, not once, but twice, which had a lot of people go, wait, what? So round one, We hit him so hard, so fast. It was a lot of fun. We were fairly aggressive that he gutted and amended his own bill away from what he was doing and came up with another idea to go after CCWs. And then we hit that so hard that he lost the same bill number twice in the same session. So we enjoyed that. It was
Sort of a
good
parting
time.
gift to that clown as he goes
Yeah.
out of office. Yeah, right.
So we were like, that was fun. We had Elena Gonzalez, who came up with a bill that would turn the firearm safety certificate, known as the FFC, into a gun license. We hit her really, really hard over and over in public safety of why this was wrong. Talked about all the things that people had been promised, never had been delivered on, just kept that up. And she kept having to amend it and amend it. It eventually got amended down to a bill that said, within 120 days of moving your firearm collection to California, you would have to get an FFC. And I don't think it was me alone, but I went on several programs like this and said, okay, how many people are actually moving to California? And then of those, how many are moving a firearms collection? And then how would you ever know that you need an FFC 120 days? Because it's not like when we were kids and there was that lady that would show up at your door when you moved to a neighborhood. Here's the welcome wagon. That doesn't exist anymore.
No.
And so
And she
like,
didn't tell you about an FSC or anything else for
Right.
that matter. She told you, she may have given you cookies and lemonade, but that was about it.
Yeah, and so I did that enough, as did a couple other people, and that bill died a week ago when they didn't have the money for it. She just ditched it, and so it died. So that was another victory. Then they wanted to turn all of our insurance agents into basically their own police force, and we had talked about that.
Yep.
We killed that bill, destroyed it. It went bye-bye, the way of the dodo. So we were very happy with that. And so now we're left with 3 bills, 2 of which we still don't like. One is Senate Bill 53, which is Portantino's last bill. It was just amended yet again today. It has been amended 6 times in the past 5 days.
Wow. Is that one on its way out as well?
It may
Hopefully.
be. We're continuing to fight on it, but even if it does get through, it's a clear violation of the Constitution because it demands that you separate your ammunition from your firearm in 2 separate lock devices.
That's Heller.
Yeah, that's
Right.
Heller, that's McDonald,
That's
and
McDonald.
that's Bruin.
Then that's Bruin. Yeah, right.
So like 3
many
different
times is-
Supreme Courts.
How many times does the Supreme Court need to say that that's unconstitutional before? Well, but California doesn't care. They'll do it anyway. That's all.
So that one, it could get across the line and get voted in, and the governor may or may not sign. I could actually see Newsom vetoing it. But
Okay, so
we'll see what happens.
that's an interesting statement. Why? That dude generally signs anything and everything that's the most hateful
because
thing,
he's
whatever it
seeking
is.
higher office. He
So it's
wants
again, it's back to
run.
optics. Why
Yeah.
am I cleaning up the homeless people now when I didn't care for the last several years? Why am I trying to deal with it? This is why he's jumping out trying to act like he's the savior of the
Oh, and
state.
that's why all of a sudden he's went from a very anti-hunting where, well, in the right situation, hunting's okay because, and he started getting pictures of himself hunting in Montana and stuff because he knows he's got to get the Midwest to like him. So, yeah, anyway.
Just for the record, if you're watching this from somewhere else in the state, Gavin Newsom is one of, if not, well, he wasn't but he's one of the most despicable human beings walking this earth. My advice is do not elect him to anything. Let his political career just die when he's done as governor of California. Otherwise, he will California the rest of the country. So there you go.
And then we have Assembly Bill 3064, which is from Manshine. It's a bill that we're still fighting. This bill, it just irritates me so much because it creates several problems beyond the most obvious ones. And so this is a good bill for teaching people what I call unintended consequences, or maybe not. Maybe they are intended. And so to unpack that a little bit fairly quick is that this bill says, you're safe. We're not sure if that's really, safe.
Oh, that's the safe bill. Oh, yeah. Oh, my God.
The little safety device on your firearm to keep a kid from using it. Well, we're not sure that's safe. But you know how we would be sure? If you bought one on our new, really fancy approved roster of firearm safety devices.
Which we got paid to put on the list because we
Right.
required the manufacturers to write us a big check or it doesn't go on there.
And most of those manufacturers are from China.
Who knew?
Interesting. But
President Xi is working his way into our firearms safe.
maybe that's why a certain governor took a certain trip. But hey, I digress. So, and all joking aside and not trying to make light of this, what this does do is three really big things. One, it makes any safe you have obsolete, which means two things. One, if you're going to be the
So you
person to be compliant,
spent $2,500 on a Liberty safe or whatever,
yeah,
and now because it's not on the list, it's not safe according to California. You got to buy something else. Is that what you're saying?
right.
Nice.
Which means no one's going to pay you a good price for that safe
No,
because it's not approved.
unless you sell it to somebody and have to ship it. Can you imagine what you have to do to ship that thing to Montana or Arizona or
Right.
whatever? Oh, my
And you're not
God.
going to get good money for it.
No.
So safes are going to end up in the trash in other places.
Wow.
Second thing it does is, remember that form that when you went and filled out your, 73 and said, this is who, you had that other form that said, oh, this is for DOJ. I have a safe, blah, 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 blah. Well, no one ever asked, where did that form go?
Well, the state's got it. Or do they? I don't know. Where does that form go?
Yeah. No one seems to have a good answer on that, but it was interesting in testimony when Manshine's like, well, now we'll have a database of who has what size safe where. Which goes to the issue that if Joel has two safes, the whole
He must have enough guns to put in the two safes.
Right.
Oh, and by the way, Joel
now-
is buying this ammunition, we know, because he had to do a background check to buy it. And now we know he must have this many guns, and he's got at least these that shoot this. Oh, my gosh.
Right.
Talk about a back alley way to form a registration and know what you have and what you don't.
Correct.
Yeah.
So that's what this is all about. And it's tied to 53 because these are the safety devices required to be in compliance with Portandino's bill in the Senate. So yes, we will be suing on both of those if they get signed in because they're both unconstitutional. But doesn't mean we haven't had to fight them. But those are the two big bills that we're looking at in this last, well, the 31st is our last day. And then at midnight, we're done. So
what else? What's you said? You got one more? You said three.
yeah, there's another one by Zabur. And
I'm almost afraid to ask, but I need to know.
yeah, no, it deals with red flag laws. And what we've had is several bills. Just a second. I want to make sure I give you the right number because we had three bills and they're all closely numbered. So just a second.
That's okay. Now, while you're looking, I want to mention something that you mentioned. You said there's a lot of apathy, and that's not good. The only thing I can think of is the apathy comes from knowing. I think Californians just know instinctively, even if they don't know the names of the people, that the California Illuminati, for lack of a better word, these oligarch families control the state. And so as a Californian, you say, well, gee, what's the difference? If I don't want this or I don't want that or I want this or I want that, these rich families have got the marionette strings, if not for all of the representatives in the Assembly and the Senate, for a significant number of them and a significant enough number that no matter what I want, these families are going to get what they want. And so that brings up the question about the optics again. So I go back to that again. If these families want what they want and they're going to get what they want anyway, why do the optics matter exactly? I mean, these people don't really care what the constituents think, so why does it matter what the constituents think if they're going to get the money and they're going to get the support from these crazy people anyhow?
No, that's a fair question. I think there's some things that have changed in this year. And that's why I wanted to highlight with the fact that we're just down to these three bills. And the last one, just so I give you the numbers, 2917. And what it would do really quick is it would allow for an additional 1 to 5 year period being added on to a restraining order over firearms. So the same.
It's the same battle. It's just a different number. Right. Okay.
So, and we're not into that. So we're trying to defeat that one as well. But if you look at what they mounted up, and we stopped a lot of them, and the question that maybe is on people's minds but hasn't been really asked is how. And that is the demographics of the state are a little bit different than they have been in the past. And you know, I had a talk with Sam this morning before I went to the long day, which is why we had to meet later today to do this particular podcast. Here's some broad brushstroke items. One, a lot of people are more like Elon Musk. They had been formerly Democrats. They didn't really change their political viewpoint. The Democratic Party in California shifted way to the left and left them in now what is either independent or moderate Republican territory, depending on how you want to shape that line. California literally has close to a third of its people are no party preference. They're not Republican or Democrat. That has allowed some things. And so long time ago, and I don't want to say like it was 6 months or 9 months, but it's been a while, I told you there were a couple of people in the Assembly and Senate that were getting ready to jump ship. And there were a lot of people that were like, really? Well, we just had one. We had Senator Marie Alvarado Gill out of El Dorado County, who had been a force to be reckoned with on the Democratic side. She jumped, became a Republican. We have others right now in both the Assembly and Senate that depending on what happens with the elections, what happens with if this third party that Kennedy and Shannon have been pushing takes hold, there's a lot of like things in play right now as we do this podcast, but there are windows where those people are looking to move because so much of their base has changed. So much of their base is done with the politics of California. And so, yeah, if you're in a lockdown area, and I'm not trying to be mean, but there's parts of the inner cities of San Francisco, LA, San Diego, where my heart goes out to those people, but they've been entrenched in the same poor public policy for the past 40 years. I mean, and I can't explain to you why, if you've had potholes and you had someone every 2 years come and say, vote for me, Joel, and I'll fix the potholes, and they've never got fixed, I just don't understand how you keep voting for the same party. But the rest of the state is not that way, and there is a majority. Now, does that mean we're going to, elect Donald Trump overwhelmingly in California? No, that's not going to happen this election cycle. Does it mean that in the 26th election, we could see the dynasties losing control of the governor? Yeah, very much so. That's definitely in play.
So you just used a word I think is interesting. You said, does that mean we are going to elect Donald Trump overwhelmingly?
Yeah.
Do you think there's even a ghost of a chance that the state of California might go to Donald Trump?
Well, you're asking me this question before we know the outcome of tomorrow. I think.
Well, tomorrow we got to find out whether Kennedy's going to go work with Trump or not, and that's going to be huge.
If he does, that could be a shift that could open that possibility.
Look, I just got to say it. Right? I mean, you and I have been at this a long time, brother. Yeah. Just the fact that is even an honest statement, that there's even the remotest possibility that California, which was at one time in your lifetime and mine a reliably red state, is now so blue it's ridiculous. Is it working its way back to being purple again?
I think it is. And I think that's one of the reasons that I'm pretty positive right now, because looking out at what we've been up against, there is a lot of movement. There's a lot of members of the party that have moved more to the center. There's a lot of them that before we close their doors, wouldn't sit down with the likes of myself or Sam or anybody else in this space and have a conversation, who now sit down and have those conversations. So yeah, I see a lot of movement. I see a lot of opportunities. CRPA's highlighted there's about a dozen races that are less than 2,000 votes from turning from blue to red. And 2,000 votes in most elections is like one person in one house in a tract of homes switching their vote or deciding to vote. So this isn't like an overwhelming, we can't get their number. These are definitely in play. And so you see a lot of those fights going on right now. The next month before we start voting on October 6th, which is when a lot of people will start to vote, is highly critical. I think what we see in this state with the third party trying to get up off the ground and move shows the deep dissatisfaction, because you couldn't have peeled off that many people from the two parties if they were doing their jobs halfway right. And, while I support the Republican ideas, especially when it comes to the Second Amendment, they've made their share of mistakes as well. And so
well, I'm just going to say that sometimes the Republicans and the Democrats, there's not an inch of light between them. I mean, there are times when they're in lockstep, which is very, very frustrating.
And I think this is
hence the reason why you got so many Californians that are not voting, they're not identifying with either one of those.
Right.
For that reason, because they're like the same in so many respects.
And so I think, depending on what happens with this power play with Kennedy, that could be a game changer. But even without that, we've seen a shift of a lot of people starting to say, hey, I'm not going to go that far left. And we have 37 members of the legislature that after the ring of the bell on the 31st of this month are no longer there.
They're done. Yeah. Now, just out of curiosity, if you look at that 37 members on average, where are they? Left, right?
Dems. The majority are Dems. And there's about 6 of those seats that are very much takeable in this election and are hotly contested and have red candidates that were within 2,000 votes. So here's the good news. And we've talked about it. We have probably the best shot we've had in a decade of breaking the supermajority. And depending on what happens with the rollout tomorrow with candy and stuff, we could see a point where we would just have to grab a small caucus to vote with us and we could actually break the majority. And that becomes a political game changer in the Capitol in the space of the Second Amendment and all the things we derive from it.
Particularly if we replace the knucklehead sitting in the governor's seat with somebody that has more than 2 brain cells functioning and is not actually going to do things that help.
And we have some amazing candidates. I mean, let's look at that right now.
Yeah, let's do it. I want to know. Now you got me all fired up and excited.
Yeah.
When we started, before we even started, you said, I'm Mr. Happy and I'm Mr. Positive today. I'm like, cool, okay.
Well,
so help us out.
You got Chad Bianco, who if you haven't, you should have on our show.
Yeah, I know who he is.
Happy. But Chad Bianco is the sheriff of Riverside County. He has not legally said he's running for governor. He's on a statewide public safety tour. Anybody that knows Chad knows.
Dude's been running for governor for about 2 years. Okay.
Yeah. So you've got Nicole Shanahan, who said that if Robert Kennedy decides to go work with Trump, that she is seriously considering going out, and she had the same viewpoints of Robert Kennedy on the Second Amendment, which are far, far more appreciated than anything we've had with Gavin Newsom or Jerry Brown. So, I mean, we've got a couple of really solid candidates that have the money and have people behind them early on. That is a huge advantage in a gubernatorial race here in California. So, and we'll see those races kick off like November 15th of this year. But, and that's where the opportunity comes from for our base, that our base should start getting excited saying we're winning, we're gaining some seats, we're taking some stuff back. Where, if we get Donald Trump back into the White House, we'll secure the Ninth Circuit, which will get us some of the victories we've needed. I mean, there's a lot to be said over the next 60 days that we can make huge changes in this state and in this country. And that's why I'm being very positive, because now's the time to get excited and get out there and play ball.
It's a little bit like heart surgery, okay? Because I'm sitting here going, okay, we're winning, but it doesn't feel like it. Well, if I had a valve that needed to be replaced and I went in for heart surgery and they gave me no anesthetic and just 4 guys, it would take more than 4 guys. I'm pretty strong. 6 guys to hold me down or strap me down. I might win in the end, but it surely would not feel like I'm winning as the doctor is replacing a valve in my heart. I think that's kind of where we're at. You know, you're doing surgery on the state of California and on the restoration of our rights, and it's painful. It's painful for you. It's painful for Sam. It's painful for Chuck and all of his attorneys. It's painful for everybody in this battle. And man, is it painful for the patient. I mean, it's painful for the people of California. And so it doesn't, I mean, truthfully, I know we're winning because I know some of the details, and and you and I are extraordinarily close friends, and I trust you implicitly for obvious reasons. So when you tell me we're winning, I don't doubt that at all.
Right.
But man, from the gun owner perspective, it just don't feel that way. It kind of does when you go to the gun store and there's actually, you can get a P365 now. You can get a Hellcat. You can get there's actually some guns showing up on the roster that you couldn't get for love or money. Well, you could if you had a lot of money. Somebody was selling one used, but I mean, other than that. And so I can see a little bit of change there, and there's a little bit more happiness going around when I'm on the range from folks. So you can see the little victories, but you're not talking about little victories, brother. You're talking about knocking the ball out of the park.
Right. And that's where I want people to realize we are knocking the ball out of the park. You look at, the fact that the 1 in 30 got blown up this past week in the courts. And so you're not limited to one firearm every 30 days. You can.
They made us stay. Okay, so at the P2K range where I teach a lot, they actually had like a ceremony,
Right.
And they took the sign and they drew the big line through the sign that's supposed to be posted there. And they made a big production out of that sucker because we've been living under that tyrannical nonsense for a long time.
Right. And that's
crazy.
That's where I'm just trying to get people recognize that the ball is starting to move down the field in a direction we haven't seen it move in quite some time.
Well, I think the difference is we've been playing defense the whole time. We haven't had an offense. We haven't been throwing passes, to extend your metaphor. We haven't been running plays. We haven't been doing anything. We've been hoping the defense and special teams would at least keep the enemy out of the end zone. You're talking about heading down the field, taking the ball down the field, putting it in the end zone and getting an extra point, and eventually putting more points on the board by the end of the game than the other team is getting.
Right.
That's not something that 5 years ago you and I'd be talking about.
No. And 5 years ago, we wouldn't have talked about defeating Katie Porter. We wouldn't have talked about stopping, Carolyn Menjivar from getting into office or anybody else that played any games. All those things happened this year. Reggie Jones-Sawyer didn't make it into the city council.
It's like the old Chinese curse. May you live in interesting times, but at least they're getting interesting in our direction, which I'm grateful for.
Right. And that's why I just want people to be encouraged. We are starting to turn back the tide, and we're starting to get some key victories that are great. We're slowing their machine down. We didn't end up doing what I think the Democratic Party had hoped for, and which was sending 15 of the most anti-Second Amendment people to the nation's capital. We stopped them all. They didn't go. That's incredible. We're policing our own grounds.
You stopped them all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They didn't
Well,
go.
and then we haven't even talked about the court victories lately, except for the one. I mean, there have been some court victories we'll have to do on another day. Otherwise, this will get to be here for 2 hours, unless you want to hit them real quick.
No, I'll let Chuck.
You'll let the legal beagles do it. Okay.
That fun. Yeah.
Okay.
That's
All right. That makes sense. That's very exciting. Very exciting, Rick. Please congratulate Sam. The two of you guys are beating them down. I'm grateful. By the way, these are the two guys you talking about. I think. Look, if you're watching this, I talk to a lot of people from a lot of different, organizations that fight for the Second Amendment, and maybe I'm biased or something. I don't know. I could be, who knows? But just from what I'm seeing people do, I don't think there's an organization even in the country that rivals the California Rifle and Pistol Association, what they're doing right now. I'd say nationally, probably the next one would be the Gun Owners of America as far as what they do up there in Washington and some of the things that they're doing. But remember, CRPA is working with Gun Owners of California and Sam's group over there. And what's Gun Owners of California part of? Gun Owners of America. And so I think, there are other folks doing stuff, but not at the level that these folks are doing stuff. So,
I will
you got to
say
support them. You got to support them. You got to support them, please.
Yeah,
I'll put a link in the description.
I will say there's a couple other groups that have really emerged. They're not necessarily just in the Second Amendment space, but Congressional Sportsmen's Foundation is coming in a big way. And, in our community, we got to start looking abroad. I'll do a shout out to a good friend, Wayne Koto, who is with the CCA Cal, which is the offshore, fishermen like you and me. They have stood side by side with us constantly on various bills to help get them defeated and to help get a couple positive bills passed, which we did get a positive bill in hunting passed this year. So we've got some people that are rising up to the challenge and are standing strong with us, and that's helped Sam and I a great deal.
Well, I'm super grateful. All right, you mentioned something that, when we get off the call, you and I have got to talk to about and get with Pete about. You said the magic word, fishing. Been a while since we did that. We got
to go drown some worms.
We got to
buddy.
go drown some bait. That's right. We don't care if we catch anything, as long as we can drink a beer and get something to eat and drown the bait. Catching something would be nice. That would be nice. Yeah. Well, is there anything we haven't talked about that we should? I'll chase down Chuck about the legal beagle stuff, and we can go from there.
No, it's just great, and it's great to be on the show, and hello to all the viewers.
Rick, thank you very much, brother. Appreciate all the hard work you do. Please say hi to Sam to me and and I will text him in a minute and congratulate him. That's extremely cool. Have a great week.
You too.
Thank you very much for watching the whole interview. I'm super grateful that you did. I know it was a little long, but gosh darn it, when you got a lot of positive news, you got to get out there and share it. I think that's pretty cool. So I'm really grateful that you watched. Thank you for doing that. I want to remind you again, if you're on YouTube, get your fanny over to Rumble and X so that you don't miss out on stuff I might produce in the future, because some things go over there that don't go over on YouTube. My primary platform right now is Rumble, and I'm trying to get people to move over there. I post things on YouTube too, but everything I post goes on Rumble and X. Links in the description. Have a wonderful week. Thank you very much for all of your support. And wherever you go, whatever you do, stay safe.